That was Caroline Flint. Well, that prompted this retort from John McDonnell on last night's Westminster Hour on Radio 4.
Well, I've heard Caroline Flint quoted today, quoting me, and I never actually said what she supposedly quoted me as saying. What I said after the elections themselves was that people predicted that we were facing disaster of losing anything between 175 and 200 seats. And when you compare our success in the last week with what happened in 2012, when we fought these seats last time round, we were at the highest level of approval for Ed Miliband, and we've actually virtually maintained that high level of support. I'm not in any way complacent about that. All I'm saying is be fair in your assessment.
And the Shadow Chancellor also took to Twitter to defend himself. He wrote, Caroline Flint, you quoted me saying, recent elections, we are looking to hang on. I never said this. Could you now publicly correct this? To which Ms Flint responded by citing PNA's Politics on Radio 5 Live from the 24th of April, writing, John McDonnell MP said, hold on to as much as we possibly can. I said hang. Big deal. Joining us now from our Brighton studio is the Labour Party councillor and Momentum activist Sam Tarry. Sam Tarry, welcome to the programme. Why is John McDonnell having a public row with another Labour MP?
Well, I mean, obviously at the moment there's been a lot of rows going on. I think the interesting thing is that there are clearly two agendas trying to be set here. One of the things that's, I find quite disconcerting is the way that so many PLP members, Labour MPs, have just taken to the airwaves to put the boot in, actually, after a set of election results in local government that are pretty respectable and absolutely stonking results for the Bristol Mayor, really dramatic win.
Right.
I mean, thinking how badly Labour had been doing there for a period of time.
We will come on to the results in just a moment, but why did he send her a public tweet? I mean, he said he wants the party to unite and it's peace in our time, and here he is demanding she correct something she said, but demanding she does it publicly. Is that the best strategy for unifying the party?
Twitter doesn't necessarily lead to the most conciliatory discussion, I find, actually. So, I'd advise people just to sort of, calm down slightly and, perhaps talk in a sort of a more diplomatic manner. But I think there is, something that, as a grassroots member, as a councillor of 6 years, a former chief whip, someone who's understands about party discipline, I think a lot of ordinary Labour Party members are becoming, frankly, really fed up with certain quarters of the PLP taking to the airwaves, constructing arguments just to put the boot in, because they still can't get over the fact that the candidate they supported only got 4.5% in the leadership election.
Right.
It's time to move on. Right. We've got to unite behind the leader. And it's,
do you think
grassroots members are getting fed up.
Do you think it would have been a more grown-up approach to actually say to Caroline Flint and respond to her asking for a conversation, a phone conversation, rather than carrying it out in public?
I think that, for me, I always prefer my trade unionists to get round the table and have a discussion. The junior doctor is an ACAS today. We don't need to be an ACAS, but we do actually need to be a bit more diplomatic when we talk to each other. Right. And I think Caroline Flint and others like her, there are certain MPs, I mentioned one in particular, Jo Cox, sending out an email saying to her local Labour Party that she had put the knife into Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, these people should be called in to see the whip. It's absolutely preposterous, this kind of behaviour.
Let's put that to Michael Dugher.
We've actually had a decent set of election results. We need to get behind Jeremy.
Right. Should people like Jo Cox be hauled up in front of the leadership and his team to respond and say, why did you write that article the day after the elections?
Well, in fairness to Joe and Neil, who did write that article, both of whom nominated Jeremy, by the way, they said that they had deliberately waited until after polling day because they didn't want to do anything to undermine our campaign on the ground. But, they are entitled to speak their mind. I mean, I think there's an issue about how we conduct this debate. So I think it was regrettable, John McDonnell's taking to Twitter. I just put that down to, I thought he'd had a long weekend and, it's it's long hours on the front bench, and some people are still getting used to it, I think.
Right. But you've said we should have done much better in the last 24 hours. So you were also adding to this feeling.
Don't forget, Jeremy Corbyn defined his leadership at the party conference by saying, I want a new kind of politics where we can have debate and where even there's a room for a little dissent. Not unreasonable from someone who voted against a Labour leader in a Labour Parliament more times than a Conservative Party leader. So, I mean, these kind of accusations of, disloyalty, it is slightly hard to bear. But the truth is, whatever side we came from on the leadership, all of us in the Labour Party now have to come together and reflect on those results, because the public dealt us a verdict there. Now, you can contrast, say, London and Scotland. And I think we can learn lessons from both. We can take the positive about London and say, right, what kind of a campaign, what kind of a message did we have there, where we were out of our comfort zone, where we were not just talking to ourselves and mobilising the base, but where we were out there reaching out to people who had voted Conservative, heaven forbid, people who had not voted Labour before. And yet at the same time in Scotland, we had a campaign, a hideous momentum, hard left experience, where we were going on a left-wing anti-Trident. I mean, putting anti-Trident in your manifesto, which is self-evidently anti-jobs in Scotland, surprise, surprise, that ended up in absolute disaster. Right, there are lessons from the good and the bad that we've got to learn here.
Well, let's put that to Sam.
Trident party just won an absolute, third term of government. That's just absolute cobblers. I mean, look, my personal position is, I think we need to have a serious discussion with the trade unions about Trident and about those jobs. And I do actually agree with you, Michael, it shouldn't be the centre of our sort of discussion. But to say that in Scotland that's not a popular position is frankly bonkers. I mean, the SNP have been one of the most vociferous campaigning organisations in Scotland against Trident, and yet they just wiped us out the last election.
Right, but Sam Tarry,
for me, we're still reaping the...
Go on, Michael, you want to respond to that. You're bonkers,
we're still reaping,
and that position is bonkers.
In Scotland.
The truth is, I think Jeremy, and he said this a year ago, felt the situation that we have in Scotland was actually very straightforward. All we needed was a hard left, anti-austerity, anti-Trident, left-wing message, and that we would, and he said it would be his top priority and was convinced of victory. Actually, we went backwards and finished third behind the Conservatives. You can't kind of out-left-wing the SNP, you can't out-nat the SNP, so we've got huge lessons to learn in Scotland. But equally, we've got lessons to learn from areas where we did well. And we fought a lot of very ultra campaigns, by the way, places like Exeter. The Sadiq campaign in London was very different to many of the others. And Jeremy was right to say that we hung on, or hold on, as John McDonnell said. But that should not be the pinnacle of our ambition a year after a general election, because even in places where we hung on, in absolute key seats, 11% swing against us in Nuneaton. Look at areas where we went backwards, in Derby, in Thurrock, in all kinds of areas that are going to be critical. And by the way, the exam question is much harder at a general election. So this is about as good as it'll get for Labour, where you've got a Tory party in total disarray and where people know it's not a general election and you're not electing a Prime Minister.
Right.
We won't have that luxury in the future.
Sam Tarry, I mean, there was nothing on Thursday, I put to you, to suggest that you would have any chance of winning in 2020, whichever way you look at the results.
I think, look, let's address that issue of Scotland. The reality is, no matter who is a Labour leader, we got smashed under Jim Murphy in Scotland, one of the most right-wing campaigns.
And you went backwards. And you went backwards in these elections.
It's not about right or left in Scotland. It's about constitutional politics.
Sure.
And I think Michael's deliberately muddying the water. Everything there is seen through a completely different prism. I think you need to take that almost in isolation.
Right, but Sam Tarry, I know there's a slight delay. I know there's a slight delay on this line, but can I just ask you to answer the question? What evidence was there from the results on Thursday that you took away that says to you, we are on course to win as the Labour Party in 2020?
I think actually on the local government elections, clearly places like Crawley, some of the issues that we had around Nuneaton, people were saying we were going to get absolutely hammered in those elections.
Yes.
We didn't, actually. These are some key areas. I mean, you also think about Harlow, that's the sort of, an area not far from where I'm from. People there actually are saying that actually what Jeremy is saying has resonance for them. His economic message is really, really powerful, actually, for those people.
But you lost seats. Labour did lose.
Labour did lose seats, though, didn't they, in those English elections? The huge result in London.
Labour did lose
We
seats,
could have done
though.
better. I know there's no point beating around the bush about that,
Right.
is there? But
No.
the reality is there's a firm base to build on from a very, very high amount of councillors in 2012. And you add into that Bristol, 63% for Marvin Rees. The Greens actually knocked out the park. And in London, the reality is, despite what Michael and others might say, Jeremy is tremendously popular as well as Sadiq. That double combination, that double popularity delivered us one of the best results we're probably ever going to have in London.
Right, let me just put then to Michael Dugher, I mean, if you think the party is heading for electoral disaster in 2020, on the basis of what you said, well, you certainly don't think they're going to win at this point, do you? And you've lost Scotland, and many would argue that was a humiliating defeat to go into third place. At what point do you stop, in your words, being a protest movement? At what point do you do something about it, in your mind?
Well, I think, first of all, in these immediate days after that, those set of elections, I think we need to learn from them, including the places, as they rightly said, in Bristol where we did well, but including the places that we hung on but went backwards, and significantly so. I do think we've got serious hard lessons to learn. Look, the idea that at the moment we're on a trajectory to winning the general election would be in defiance of all history, and we've just got to be honest with ourselves about that. But also, let's talk to the voters out there, rather than just doing the meetings where we pack out the room and we all agree with each other, and we delude ourselves that something's happening out there. They're queuing round the corner. Well, surprise, surprise, the voters in many, many places did not share the same enthusiasm with us as some of our members do. So we've got huge lessons to learn, and I think that's something that any sensible party would do after what have been nationwide elections in every corner of the country.
All right, just hold fire, both of you, for a moment. Let me just turn briefly to the mayoral campaign, because as you know, you will have listened on the television and the radio, there were a large number of complaints from within your own party about the tone of the mayoral campaign, Zac Goldsmith's campaign, run by the Linton Crosby team. Do you now regret that campaign that was run?
I think Zac was and is an enormously attractive politician and an exceptionally good candidate. I'm not convinced the campaign showed all his virtues in their highest colour, and I think to that extent that was a pity. But very often after campaigns have taken place, they are judged retrospectively. And so if you have a campaign that wins, everyone says, well, actually, that must have been a brilliant campaign. And I think almost however good the campaign, it would have been very, very hard to win in London.
Right, but this is about the tone of the campaign, and it was called dog whistle politics by many, many politicians, certainly on Friday when I was covering the elections and their aftermath. We can show you some pictures now of Linton Crosby, who was the strategist in the general election. It was his team that also ran Zac Goldsmith's campaign, and he was then given and awarded a knighthood. I think we can show you the pictures now coming up.
Received the honour of knighthood, Sir Linton Crosby, for political service.
Do you think that was rather unfortunate timing, Jacob Rees-Mogg, that he should be getting a knighthood, the man that was accused, if not himself personally, but his team, of running a campaign that many thought was racist?
Well, I don't think the campaign was racist. I think that's deeply unfair.
The tone of some of the campaign, I'm not saying it, but people thought it was.
Well, people always throw political mud around. They always attack the campaigns run by opposition parties. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. But I do not think the campaign was racist. I think Linton Crosby is an extremely distinguished political strategist, played a very important role in the last general election. As I understand it, wasn't running this campaign. I think he thoroughly deserved his knighthood and should probably get an even higher knighthood.
Briefly on Michael Dugher on that campaign?
I actually think that Labour campaign should give the Labour Party nationally enormous amount of encouragement and hope, actually. I don't believe that the next general election is lost. I think it is in our hands. And I think Sadiq showed us that if you have a campaign rooted in the centre ground, where you've got a principled, dignified campaign that's got practical policies that command popular support, where you've got strong leadership, the strong leadership that Sadiq showed on anti-Semitism, I think it shows that when Labour reaches out beyond our core voters and our base, we can win, and we should take enormous encouragement from that, and we can do it in spite of a hostile Tory media and all the Tory money and all the Tory strategists in the world.
Sam Tarry, thank you very much.